Okay, welcome. We've got give people a few moments to join here. So we've got a slide up. You should be hearing music. That's planned. That's planned. That's not a weird app on your computer. We've got some tunes here just in the background here. Wonderful to see some names here. I'm recognizing many of these names, and also welcome. There's some names that look new to the community as well. So you are more than welcome to join this as well. We're going to give folks just a couple more moments to join here. Again, we are recording this, and then we'll get started in just another minute. All right. Oh, cool, fun. I'm really enjoying looking at this participant list. There's some of you I haven't connected with in a while, but so hello. It's great to see your name. And again, a couple new joins. So for those of you first time interacting with MovingWorlds here, a warm welcome. Even in webinar format. I know we don't have you on video, but very much appreciate y'all taking the time. Okay, well, we are going to respect our on-time registrants and attendees here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. As much as I would like to keep the tunes going, I know that can also be a little weird sometimes. So we're going to go ahead and kick off the tunes, and we're going to jump into full webinar mode here. So welcome everybody to Proving the Business Case for Skills-Based Volunteering, featuring Steve Rochlin from Impact ROI. I am really excited for this conversation because I've been a CSR ROI nerd for the better part of a decade, and some of Steve's content from about a decade back is I think really influential on this sector. And in late 2025, he published an update to Project ROI. It's the most cited analysis of the ROI of corporate social responsibility programs that's, as far as my knowledge, ever been created, and a really incredible opportunity to hear from somebody as well networked, as well researched, and as well as immersed in this space as Steve. So, Steve, we're going to turn it over to you in just a moment. I just really want to say thank you. It's such a privilege to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And so let's talk a little bit, just as a reminder, especially for some of you, as I'm looking at these names, there's some new folks to the MovingWorlds community. We are a global platform specifically focused on helping corporations scale up skills-based volunteering. We know there's increasing interest in skills-based volunteering. For everybody that was nerding out on the Benevity report that came out earlier this year, we know employee demand for skills-based volunteering is up. We know the ROI of skills-based volunteering, that case has never been stronger. And we really feel incredibly privileged to be able to supporting some incredible organizations and partner companies on scaling up skills-based programs globally. So of course, this topic with Steve is near and dear to our heart, because especially in this political, social, and environmental context, being able to validate and talk about the ROI of these programs is increasingly important. And that's why we've asked Steve to join us all today. So kind of doing intros, that's almost over. Already talked about MovingWorlds. That means in just a moment, I'll stop yabbering and we'll hear directly from Steve. He's going to talk about Project ROI, and then we're going to open this up to questions. Now, some of you have already sent me questions, so I'm going to insert some of those in as well. But if everybody looks down kind of at the bottom of their Zoom bar or at the top, depending where they place it, there should be a Q&A widget. And if you click on that, that should enable you to ask a question. You may also have a chat, depending on which client you're using here, so you can also send those in. We will get to those, and I will act as MC here, and I will pull those questions into Steve as we go. So, with that, this is the point where I get to turn it over to Steve. Steve's going to start us off by talking a little bit more, just laying a land of the business case for this topic, and then share some of his insights, and then we'll go directly into that Q&A. And again, this is recording. If you do have to jump off early, we'll absolutely get that over to you all. So, Steve, without further ado, handing it over to you to lead the conversation.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and Moving Worlds inviting me to be here today. I am going to try and fight with Zoom to see if I can share the screen. And so, Mark, is it coming through?
It is coming across. The Zoom gods are in our favor today.
Fantastic. So you and I are both in a rare and an elite club of the folks with hard to pronounce last names. So Steve Rochlin here, as CEO of Impact ROI. I'm going to sort of race through some of these slides so we can get more of the conversation. And let me start by talking a little bit about Impact ROI. We are a global strategic advisory firm that focuses on all things sustainability, ESG, social impact, CSR, also DEI. And our focus really is connecting the dots between financial, social, and environmental performance to strengthen all three at the same time, and also on measuring both the business case for the work that all of us do, as well as the social impact that we do. And I've been in this field for about 30 years. I came out of the Harvard Kennedy School. I was the head of R&D for the Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship for many years, head of North America for Accountability. So I've got a track record. Impact ROI has been around for about 13, 14 years. We all know that globally, and this is something that we've exported from the United States, the backlash against this kind of work is intense. But I'm here to tell you that after research that we've done, and this is research that I'm a lead author of, but also with my great colleagues and partners from Babson College. And if you don't know Babson, Babson is a full business school and considered to be the number one ranked business school in the world for entrepreneurship. So they're my co-authors on this. And I'm here to say that based on the original research we did together 10 years ago and the research that we've done recently that we published at the end of last year, we think the conversation, the debate is over, that the work that we do absolutely creates value under certain conditions. We can drop the mic. We'll talk about what those conditions are. So that is a sort of a fantastic finding, very exciting finding. I've got to give a shout out to our sponsors without whom this research would not be possible. Mass Mutual is our fearless and wonderful lead sponsor, the insurance company that made this all possible. We've also got two additional sponsors actually from Europe. I know that a lot of Moving Worlds community is from Europe. We have Moto, which is the consumer packaged good focusing on eyeglass frames, a leading designer there. And we have Loomis Sales, who are part of our contributing sponsors. And so what we've done is to do a study of studies. If there's questions, I'll go more into the methodology. We've looked at over 640 largely gold standard academic peer-reviewed type studies. And what we've learned is that when we're making a business case for social impact work, and when we're tying this, of course, to skills-based volunteering, what we want to do is focus really on three things. And the first is understand that the research absolutely confirms that what we do has value, but we have to do it well. And that seems like kind of a master of the obvious type of statement. But actually, it's very important because we find that when we are talking to C-suites, when we're talking to board of directors, and they're saying, is this work helping the business or cost center? When we say it absolutely helps financial performance, but only if we do it well, that actually gives us a tremendous amount of credibility. Because what happens in this field is that very often we try and oversell what we're doing and suggest that anything that we're doing in skills-based volunteering and social impact is going to be good for the bottom line. That could not be true, could not possibly be true. There are ways in which we could do this badly. There are ways we can do this in a misaligned way that actually is pure cost and hurts the business, doesn't help it. So we have to understand that we have to do it well. And we actually have the answers of what doing it well looks like. Now, one of the things that will come up is to say for some certain companies, they will say, even in Europe, in which there's a lot of support for this type of activity, they'll say, it doesn't really make intuitive sense to me. It doesn't seem like this would be the type of thing that would drive business success. This is the complicated version of what our research has found in terms of what, and I'm just going to use social impact to encompass skills-based volunteering and other volunteering work. what you are doing that actually supports the business. This is sort of the high level answer to what's going on, but let's sort of make it into a nice digestible soundbite. And that is that what we're really doing ultimately is enhancing the trust that our stakeholders have for us. And that's the trust of our investors, our customers, our employees, our communities, all have for us. And that trust, as economists have found out in really studying this over the last 30 or 40 years, trust is incredibly important in terms of driving financial performance and value. And when we think about it, the kinds of ways that we, as sort of the general public, can understand which companies should we trust. How do we know who to trust? We actually have lost over the last few decades the third parties and the brokers that would actually help us understand this company is trustworthy, this one isn't. Advertising doesn't do it. We have a study that shows that around one third, it's a little bit more, but only around one third of consumers and customers actually trust the advertising that they see from companies. So advertising isn't doing it, and hasn't been doing it for a while. What we find is that when they see the kind of work that you do in skills-based volunteering and social impact more broadly, sustainability as well, that is actually a way, a shorthand way to allow your different stakeholders to say, this is a company that we trust and that we want to work with, that we want to invest in, work for, buy from, get into a contractual relationship with. And that drives the kind of business value that we're going to be talking about. Now, there are a number of you who are clever. All of you are clever, I'm sure, and many of your senior leadership in your companies are going to be very clever, and they're going to say, well, look, if this is as great for the bottom line and top line growth and financial performance as you say it is, then how come we don't see companies leaning into this as a core value creating strategy? And this is one of my favorite findings in the latest research that we've done. And that is that actually financially successful companies do exactly that, that they lean into social impact as a strategy to support financial value creation. And there's a number of ways that they do it. If you're in an industry that is highly, highly competitive, the best financially performing companies lean into this in a way to actually differentiate and outcompete their rivals. Um, if you are in a situation in which there's a down business cycle, the most successful financially performing companies lean into social impact as well as sustainability in order to help them get out of that down business cycle. And there are a number of other examples as well. So this is one of the most fascinating and I think exciting findings of the latest research that we've done. But a lot of people get super excited by numbers. So let's get really excited about that. So here's what we found. There's a way in which, if we do this well, we get into a conversation where we can boost our financial performance across a number of key performance indicators. First, around financial performance indicators, something that the board, the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO can love. We have the opportunity to improve our firm valuation by as much as 36%, profitability 21%, share price by 6%. Now, we are not promised to get these very, very high and big numbers. But if we do it well, we start getting on the continuum where we can be heading towards these elements. These are the sort of the ceiling potential that we can get. And this is in reference and comparison to our competitors who are not doing social impact and sustainability as well as we are. On sales, we can boost our sales by as much as 20%. On risks and costs, we can reduce financial and market-based risks by as much as 30%. That helps us reduce costs, preserve our share price value. And then we can also reduce the cost of equity and cost of debt by notable and material numbers that should excite our chief financial officers. Responsible sourcing is going to be more related to sustainability than social impact, but human resources we can have an impact on, particularly on the volunteer side. And what we can do there is we can reduce our employee turnover by as much as 57%. We can improve employee productivity by 21%. And then the only piece of bad news that I have, which is good news for the CFO, he or she will love this, we won't, is that we are actually underpaid in this field. That if we are working for an employer that we think is really good at social impact and sustainability, that we are willing to take a 12% pay cut. And so bad news for all of us on this webinar, but good news for the bean counters in our company. So that's the
Steve,
story. Mark, go
Steve, sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, I hate to interrupt because I'm loving the flow here, and I'm also loud. I like at Bean Counter. My background's actually in accounting. I don't think we had talked about that before, so I'm like, my people. But anyway, I'm loving this data, and one of the points just on the previous slide, even before the data, you said like companies like during a downturn, knowing who's on this audience here. Um, we are seeing a lot of teams actually be downsized during this time, even if companies are investing into this. Are there examples of companies that you think, like even during these times where you've seen some of these investments actually increase? Like, that I think that like that actual like beyond the data, like the name of an organization or a specific initiative that really like pops to mind that you think demonstrates this really well?
Thanks for the question. I'm going to answer in a two-part way. And so the first part is at a more macro level. And so what the interesting thing about this finding is that we're seeing this starting in the United States, and the United States is kind of creating a contagion right now that's starting to go around the world. And it's very much not so much about the political backlash, it's more about concern about the global economy. And there's a sense that even though many economists continue to say that despite the geopolitical things and despite increased inflation and oil prices, et cetera, that a lot are still suggesting that the fundamentals of the global economy are still strong. What's clear is that across industries and C-suites and boards, no one believes that. And that's been the case for really the last 18 months. And so companies have been really tight with their spending in cash, and they've been looking at places to cut, and they've been saying we have to cut the social impact team and their friends and colleagues on the sustainability team. And that is a mistake. Our research shows very, very strongly that it is short-sighted and it's actually going to be hurting their ability to ride out whatever this business cycle is and to come out strong, to be strong and to come out even stronger from it. Now, the question in terms of do I have examples of companies that are maintaining their investment? A number. The ones that I know, unfortunately, I don't know if they would appreciate me calling them out by name. I'd rather get their permission. But what I will say is this. I'm working with very, very famous brand names in the consumer packaged goods space that have not cut back. I'm working with companies in the food and beverage space. I'm working with companies in the retail space, as some examples. Working in companies of all things in the sort of big manufacturing, innovation, aerospace, and defense that have said that in the wake of what's going on, we are going to hold firm. We're going to maintain, if not slightly increase our investments, and we're going to keep our teams on the social impact side as well as the sustainability side. So there are a number who are out there. The more common situation is that what we're seeing are a lot of companies that are cutting back. They're either taking advantage of the natural attrition when someone leaves, they're not replacing them, or they're starting to cut back and sort of doing sometimes it's a blanket 5, 10, 15% cut that we often see companies doing, or sometimes it's unfortunately more specifically targeted to this function. And I can say that, with respect to the circumstances that a company might be in, sometimes, it's a down business cycle and they just need to cut no matter what. But if they're doing this, then if they're doing this, it's because they're being very short-sighted about this. Mark, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, and definitely appreciate the client sensitivity, and I think even from our own observations, one of the things that we've seen like really in parallel to this is even if the global function is maybe being trimmed or they're not like replacing some seats, we're also seeing new funding come actually from the business. Like different business units are saying, oh, we can contribute some funding then either for programmatic initiatives, and we've seen that both in tech and professional services, which I think maybe speaks to this is there absolutely are some companies that are doing that. But yeah, let me kick it back over to you. Would love for you to keep going. I know you were just kind of going to advance us to the to part two, if you will, of your findings here. But thank you for letting me jump in.
Absolutely. So then, what's the next thing that we want to do is we want to know what doing it well looks like. And doing it well looks like, I'm going to go at sort of a high level so we can get through the conversation, but it's a simple to remember rubric, fit, commit, manage, and connect. Fit really means there are a lot of companies who we think we're very, very good at fit, but when we do our own diagnostics and apply some of our tools and analysis, it's not quite to where a lot of companies imagine that they are. Because fit really says we have to be really super rigorous about aligning what we're doing with skilled-based volunteering with who our stakeholders understand us to be in the marketplace and where they expect us to be in the community. And very often companies don't, for a variety of reasons, don't make the effort to do the kind of investment of time and energy to to really understand where their investors, their customers, their employees, and others really are in terms of their expectations. So it's the type of thing where it's like we sometimes make and engage in skills-based volunteering, we think makes intuitive sense, or we think is meeting a key need, but we haven't really checked to see whether or not our stakeholders really, really align with what is going on. And so the companies that do this the best really engage in a rigorous process to make sure that they understand what their stakeholders, both their business stakeholders and their community-based stakeholders, are expecting in terms of these types of programs. Make sure it sort of fits with the products and services you sell, the strategy that you have, and really align it in a rigorous way. The second thing is that they commit, and part of the commitment means doing something that often is somewhat uncomfortable for social impact professionals, and that's explicitly saying that we are going to both have an intention to improve the well-being of our communities as well as improve the financial performance of our company. So make a business case and then have a strategy that connects the dots between community well-being and also aligning with the business and business strategy. The next thing we want to do is we want to manage, and there's two parts to managing. One is that we have to be very, very disciplined. We have to manage towards measuring and delivering well-being for communities as well as a business case and being very explicit about that, following up with measurement and evaluation. The other thing we need to do is we need to manage the soft side, which I'll get into in a second. And then last but not least, we have to connect with our stakeholders. So we need to communicate about this. Sometimes companies can be a little bit precious and guarded and quiet about doing this. We have to figure out a way, even in a tough political environment, to make sure that our key stakeholders know what we're up to. And then we also have to be in dialogue, as I was talking about before, so that it's a two-way conversation. Companies that do this deliver the kinds of results that we're talking about. But I also mentioned that we need to be sensitive to the soft side of management. And this is something that's been kind of revolutionary because what we found is that research shows that a lot of times we have an inferiority complex in this work, and that we are sort of stereotyped in social impact as being the hippies and very emotional and sensitive and kumbaya, if everyone knows that old song, coming together, and that the rest of the business is analytical, leads with the head, much more focused on making smart, logical, analytical decisions. And actually, that stereotype is not quite true. That fascinating research shows that our leaders in the C-suite actually make decisions about social impact on an emotional basis, not on an analytical basis. And this helps explain an experience that some of us who've been in the field for a certain amount of time have encountered, which is that sometimes when we in social impact come to our leaders with analytical findings, they get really confused. If we come to them and say, hey, we're going to support the business case and financial impact, they kind of look at us askance. And that's because they're actually leading with their heart and their emotions when they think about this. The emotions that we run into the most often from leaders are either sentimentality, which can be helpful to an extent for some of our programs, where it kind of get that sort of, oh, isn't that nice type of feeling of wanting to see smiling faces and happy children and things like that. That doesn't necessarily lead to the kind of strategic and impactful approach that we want to take. The other emotions that we run into are anxiety and cynicism, and those are generally unhelpful. And what we find is that what's going on is that leaders often align and hew to a set of archetypes. There are more than six, but these are the six most common that we run into. And that this helps explain to them on a gut level why it is that the company is investing in this to begin with. Their analysis of this is often emotionally based. They're not necessarily right in their thinking, but we need to understand how they're thinking so that we can have a conversation. And what often happens is that those of us in this field, our archetype is often impact and purpose driven, not always, but often. And what that means is that we have a habit of talking to our leaders and colleagues in the business in a way that can actually be off-putting. So if we're dealing with a leader who has a brand and reputation archetype, and ours is impact and purpose, on Monday, we'll be able to have a really good conversation with each other that really aligns well, like a Patagonia, which really connects the dots between those archetypes brilliantly. But on Tuesday, we may be approaching them and saying things like, we have to do this because it is our obligation to do it. We are responsible for helping our communities. We must do this. Folks who say that we shouldn't do it don't get it. And someone who's got a brand, any of the other archetypes is going to be listening to this and saying, actually, you're the one who doesn't get it. I don't understand why you're talking to me this way. It's vaguely offensive and it's like you're pressuring me into doing something that's not related to the business, and I don't like you, go away. And so suddenly, we were best friends on Monday and now we seem like we're enemies on Tuesday. And you can also see how a brand and reputation archetype, particularly if you've got sort of a rudimentary version of this and you can put these archetypes on a maturity continuum. If you're focused more on public relations, then you can see that in a place where there's political backlash, you can say, well, we don't want to talk about what we're doing because there's a lot of backlash out there. And if we don't want to talk about it, and this is the reason why we're doing it, in my mind, then why are we investing in this again? And, if we need to cut back, as you were talking about earlier, Mark, let's cut back. So one of the things that we talk about is really understanding and going through a process to do an assessment of what the dominant archetypes are. And not just from the C-suite, but from the entire enterprise. There'll probably be one or two dominant archetypes. And then you have to understand that there'll be archetypes that each major department and function will have as well. So that's a key
Steve,
element.
Steve, can I jump in again? I'm trying to wait for Q&A, but I think it's almost funny that you highlight the brand and reputation, because I got three questions in like the lead up, where some of our partners asked questions, and let me ask them and kind of merge them together. And one was specifically if research surfaced any tensions between delivering real impact with beneficiaries versus delivering business ROI, and if so, how, like, any tips, like any in the weed kind of details of how do you balance it if there's tension there? And maybe even a predecessor to that question, which is, two other questions came related to this, is, you know, is there a real link between CSR programs and building brand perception and brand loyalty? And so I kind of see that, if a company is using this to build brand equity and loyalty, so it's funny, that's the example you've highlighted here, but then you're trying to build business value. Does that have negative consequences? Certainly there's tension there. How do you navigate that?
Great questions, Mark. Thank you. And I'm from the assembled. And so let's take them in order. So it's kind of funny and a little bit sad that when I broke into the field and it started doing this work 30 years ago, there used to be a lot of tension between really crass efforts at trying to amplify the brand. My favorite and most infamous example was the example of a business, a funeral home business that had decided to make a big donation to a school and conditional that the school administration would say that when your kids' grandparents move to the great beyond, that you refer them to our funeral home. And that, that's not what we want. And what I'm starting to see recently is that there's been sort of enough of a loss of institutional memory and understanding about the right way to do this kind of work that I'm actually starting to run into some of that thinking among some of the C-suites that I deal with. I was just talking with the C-suite the other day that didn't have something that was as crass and disgusting as that earlier example, but was similar in its orientation. That, we're supporting some institutions and we want to make sure that those institutions start giving us some opportunities to, promote ourselves in kind of crass ways. So one of the key things that I think the message that we have to give is that the opportunity to create value from social impact is a very, very delicate one. First, in many countries, there are laws in the books that try and restrict the amount of what's known as self-dealing that one can do with a grant or with volunteering opportunities. The second thing is that fundamentally we have to remember that the value creating engine here starts with, it's not the only engine, but starts with creating trust. And trust is incredibly fragile. And so what we need to do is to make sure that we're not doing anything in terms of our actions that could compromise the trust that we're building. And so that's a strong message. So the message that we can give any of our leaders who might be leaning into something that is off-putting is to say, look, the way that this works is by building trust. And so we have to ask ourselves, is there something that we're doing that starts to make us seem as if we're being manipulative, or that we're being unethical, or that we're being too self-focused and not focused on the needs of the community. So anything we do needs to start with delivering well-being tangibly for our community. If we don't, if we're not showing that, then the work that we're going to do is going to backfire against us, and we're going to lose money, not make money.
That
So that's,
resonates.
yeah,
Sorry to jump in. I was just going to say that that resonates so much. I think in the programs that we see on the highest net promoter scores, the highest org satisfaction, the highest employee skills, skill development, satisfaction, longevity comes when we start with the impact organization. We work backwards from there. Like when we deliver real value, then you have a real experience for professionals. Then you have a real story that you can tell and amplify. Then you have real data that speaks to legitimate impact and learning. And so anyway, I just wanted to say, from our experience, that really resonates a lot.
that's fantastic.
Go.
And then in terms of the brand value question, should we dive into that one? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, maybe let's hit on that quickly, and then I know you've got your third point to get through, and time is flying here. But this is incredible. So yeah,
Tell
let's
you
touch
what,
on it.
I'm gonna wrap this up in 2, 3 minutes. Let me just wrap up the slides, and then we can go full into the Q&A.
Perfect.
And what the last point I want to make is that one of the things that the research that we have and the report is available for download, and I've told Mark that anyone who wants copies of these slides to get in touch with me directly, and I will share them with you. Is that one of the things that we can actually start to do is something that social impact and sustainability haven't been able to do to date, and that is to start actually forecasting and then measuring the value that you provide financially. And this is an example of work that we've done with a global healthcare company of forecasting and putting together a credible plan for them to generate over a 3-year period over $1 billion in value, and then structuring the measurements so they can track and actually prove that out. And you can see the kinds of results that some of the other companies that we've worked with are able to identify. So all this is very, very exciting. And happy to follow up. And why don't we dive into the Q&A and Mark, if we want to sort of focus on the brand value question, we can do that, but tell me where to go next.
Yeah, let's start with that brand value. Just yeah, because I think that was kind of a lingering question there. And then I know we got some other Q&A and some other folks had dropped me Q&A questions as well.
So there's two parts to the brand value conversation. A lot of times when people ask that, one of the things that they want to know is, how do we actually sort of generate the sales directly? So let me sort of and how do we sort of get consumers and customers on our side? So let me talk about that for a second, because we've learned some really, really fascinating things on that. And one of the things that we found is that when we're focusing on consumers and customers, and this works on the B2C as well as the business to business side as well, is that we've often seen surveys which say that 70, 80, even 90% of consumers and customers would pay more to purchase from a company that is doing good things in the community or good things in sustainability. And the problem is that heads of marketing and brands and communication and sales have never believed those numbers, and neither do I. They're not true. They do not reflect the way that we behave. And I have some funny examples that prove that. The other thing is that we don't always in this field need to always go for the most fantastical result. So the idea that we can improve, customer purchasing by 80, 90% is too good to be true. What's more realistic and what the deep research shows is that actually our customer segments, customer and consumer segments, actually fall into different segments. There's going to be for every company anywhere from 1 to 20% a segment that if they understand what you're doing in the community and they like it, they will become loyal to you forever and they will pay more. Um, uh, and then there's going to be another segment about 1 to 40%, which is slightly less passionate. They're more interested in having a relationship that can help them be better in the way that they express their own values, and their own beliefs, in terms of supporting community and supporting people and planet and and they will also become loyal, and pay slightly more as well. And then the rest of your customer and consumer base, it's not that they're going to be against what you're doing in the community, it's just that it won't affect their decisions. So that's much more realistic. It might be anywhere from a small 2% of your customer consumer base, or it might be as much as 60. Um, uh, the key thing is that we have to find out who they are and we have to find out what they expect. And companies uniformly do a very bad job of it. Unilever has done studies like this, which has confirmed this. British Telecom has done, two European companies, Unilever and British Telecom, have done these types of studies confirming these results. We've done a study working with a big financial service firm confirming those results. And it's really powerful and transformative because you know what your communities expect. You know what to help deliver. You can be much more strategic and you can actually track the benefits on the purchasing side. Similarly, on the brand and reputation side, the key thing here is that how you want to measure brand and reputation. And it's very important what we've found is not to be too advanced in our one's evaluation that go beyond what your communications and brand and reputations teams are doing. You can use net promoter scores. You can start asking questions that start saying, how aware are you of what we're doing in the community? How much does it align to your expectations? And then ask questions that you normally would about your feeling of the brand. And you can start, doing some statistical analysis to show what's the difference between those who are very aware and how they rate your brand. What's the difference between those who feel that you're meeting their expectations in the community and how they look at your brand and compare it to those who are unaware and see if there's a delta and a positive delta for you. And we've seen a number of studies and worked with a number of companies where the positive difference has been really powerful.
Very cool. Um, So we're seeing some questions come in. For anybody that hasn't yet dropped a question, you should see a little Q&A. No guarantee that we'll be able to get to all of them in our remaining time, but we can always try and include these in follow up. And like Steve said, we'll be sharing out the slides as well. Steve, one question I wanted to ask here that came in is, what are some signals for CSR leaders to know that their social impact programming, volunteering specifically, is being, quote, done well? Particularly interested in the HR side, given the brand rep examples already shared.
Great question. So let's focus this since we're talking and leaning into the business case. Let's start with that, and then we can talk about, let's not forget the other side on this. So one of the things that on the business case side is that, we follow the prescription of fit, commit, manage, and connect, and we can actually do a diagnostic to see whether or not we are setting up our volunteer programs to support and add value to the financial performance of the business or not. And we can start to say, look, is the way that we designed our skills-based volunteering, our traditional volunteering, our team-based volunteering, some of the programs that we offer, such as Dollars for Doers and matching gifts for volunteering and others, have we aligned these with our employees in mind, first and foremost, and HR in mind? Have we actually sort of engaged our stakeholders, understand what it is that they want, how we can support them? Are we using volunteering, to meet some of the objectives in terms of community, of team building, of professional development, of things that they want? Um, and sometimes the answer is only on a very light basis. Many companies have done that, or it's been a few years since companies have really talked to their employees. So just starting with some common sense things like that. Secondly, is some of our strategic and signature volunteering activities, where we invest a lot more of our time and effort and energy, is it aligning with who we are as a business, with the treasure of our talent? Is it aligning with the capabilities that our products and services provide to the world, that our research and development provides to the world? Is it really engaging our skills in a really, really deep way? Um, and giving that opportunity and connecting the dots with the key markets, with the key community needs that we have, but also the key markets that we want to be in. And I look at companies that I'm really impressed by, the classic examples of certainly IBM and their corporate citizenship core, Pfizer and their Global Fellows program, Becton Dickinson, the big medical device company, does this. PwC has amazing programs in terms of skills-based volunteering. Um, and they've found fantastic results supporting the business. Thermo Fisher Scientific is another one that we've come across that does really great work in this regard. So those are sort of business side examples of doing it well. Is there that fit? Are we committing? And then are we following up with the management? And are we connecting and communicating with our stakeholders? Those are all the indicators that we can use at a high level to say we're doing it well from the business side. But what about from the community impact side? And there are a few things that I would say here. There are a few traps that we get in terms of, are we doing it well to make the most value that we can for the community? And the traps are these: that sometimes we fall in love with the program and not with the problem that we're trying to solve and the impact that we're trying to create. And I can't tell you how much I see this, that we work with companies that say, oh my God, no one is participating in our Dollars for Doers program, and we've got to increase this, and we must maintain this. And our bosses are talking about cutting it back because our participation rates are low. And sometimes we have to step back and say, well, if the participation rates are low and your employees don't seem to like them, then why are you keeping them? Is it that the community loves them? Do your community partners even know about them? So sometimes we get a little bit too obsessed about the program, and instead we miss the idea that this is actually an opportunity to take those resources and put them into more productive and impactful uses. And that we can start saying, number one, are we really understanding the connection between the capabilities of our volunteers and the needs that our communities have? And have we done a rigorous analysis on that? And then secondly, we designed our programs that really encourage, not force, but create certain kinds of incentives and positive nudges to push our volunteers to do those areas that are going to be most impactful for the community and good for our business. And lots of times volunteer programs are more just a model of if we build it, they will come, and very passive in the way that they're structured. And so we want to be a little bit more intentional. And so making sure, are we being more intentional? And then also starting to say, how do we start to put in the metrics so that we can understand and track the good work that our volunteers do and the results that we have. We're doing work, wonderful work for the last 5 years, supporting a professional services firm that has been able to track their skills-based volunteering with their partners and measure the results. And they focus in terms of, not surprisingly, building the capacity and capabilities of their nonprofit partners. And we've been able to track and find amazing high impact results for the community and show that well over 80% of their nonprofit partners say that they've been able to expand the number of individuals that they actually serve in the communities and increase by an average of 20% in terms of increasing the number of people that they serve. And if you think about it, if a company could increase their customer base by 20%, that would be incredible. So for a nonprofit to be able to do that is amazing. And we've also been able to track that these nonprofits believe that they've been able to increase the quality of the service they provide by over 25%. That's also an incredible number. And that they've been able to improve, that 70% of them have been able to use the work with skilled-based volunteer from this company to increase their funding, which is also incredible. So that's on the community impact side, some of the ideas and things that we can start to think about in terms of knowing that we're doing it well.
It's fantastic data, and it's in parallel with a lot of the pieces that we see as well. At MovingWorlds, we also send corporate volunteers not only with nonprofits but also with impact startups or social enterprises, and similar data points in terms of being able to reach more. Also, huge money savings, and we're actually seeing for every dollar spent on skills-based volunteers specifically, you're unleashing up to and even above 10x the value to community organizations or impact entrepreneurs. So it can be a massive kind of a multiplier of impact into areas, and then on the professional side as well. And in the chat, I dropped a link. We hosted EY and SAP on a webinar at the end of 2025, where they were also sharing some of the metrics on the impact side as well as the professional side on that ROI case study. So as a follow-up to that question there from Krista, there could be some useful metrics there. Steve, time is flying. I think we're actually maybe even over time. Can we keep you for another question? Do you need a jump? I really want to respect your time, obviously our attendees' time. How are we doing over here?
Yeah, I have until the top of the hour.
Okay, cool. So, one interesting question that I got beforehand as well was, related to ESG targets. And this was like a two-part question that was very long. I'm still unpacking it in my brain, so maybe you might be able to help me. But I think there's something in it, which is saying we're actually seeing a lot of companies pull back from ESG targets. And sometimes these CSR programs like volunteering fit into them. Sometimes they live separately. We're seeing a pullback from at least being public on those targets. And especially if we're integrating the value of these programs more into the core business, then that's also something that we're not really like publicly talking about as much here. So the question here is, should companies be setting ambitious targets? And if so, what do good targets look like in today's day and age? And how do you distinguish this being like an ESG target versus just this is a business target?
So do we want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about the ESG side, or do we want to talk about this in terms of employee volunteering targets?
Maybe we can start it employee volunteering if you're open to it, and then we can branch into the other, or the other way around if you feel like that'd be a better lead in.
Well, yeah, okay. Let me sort of t give some macro sense on this, and then talk about each side, starting with the employee volunteering. It's really, really tricky, and there are two things that are kind of driving the contraction of the way that companies are sort of either setting targets or publicly talking about targets. One is that the right wing backlash, which is the one that's getting all the headlines. But the right wing backlash would, I submit, would not be nearly as effective if not for, one could say, the left side, the backlash from the left. And the backlash from the left is something that people may be looking at me saying, Steve, what backlash from the left? The backlash from the left, I think, will become clear when I use the term greenwashing. And there's legitimate concerns about greenwashing. There's some very, very powerful studies, a number of studies, very credible, which show that anywhere from 20 to 60% of the environmental and social claims that companies publicly make may have no basis and no validity. Um, and so it is a serious and legitimate concern. And what we've seen in Europe is Europe has taken action with a number of the EU member states creating specific anti-greenwashing laws, and EU doing some things writ large. We've seen Canada take action. In the United States, we've seen several of our states take action on this. And so what you find then is companies who say, I'm getting hit from both sides. So especially if they got a brand and reputation archetype, they say, I don't really get what the purposes of doing this stuff is anymore. And they get really confused and they start saying, let's stop talking about this. Let's contract, move away from our targets, not publicly discuss them anymore. So in a really simple term, that's kind of the motivating high level analysis, what's happening out in the world on this. So then what does a good target start to look like? Well, one of the things is that the business case becomes even more important right now. And my colleague and I, we're starting a new research topic looking at sustainability 2.0, which will also include social impact 2.0. And one of the things that we need to start thinking about as our targets is that there was a little bit of target setting exuberance. And so when you see it on the volunteering side by saying, we want to have 100% of our employees volunteer. We want to make, with our employee volunteering, we want to make a difference in the lives of 1 billion people. Those are, and maybe your company, it's 1 million people, maybe another company, it's 100 million people. You start seeing those targets, and what happens is that it becomes really hard to measure, and companies start playing, real games and don't have a lot of basis and background in terms of how they're meeting those goals. Um, and so the opportunity right now is to do a reset on the employee and the social impact target setting, and starting to say, first of all, having a question is that, is just getting the participation numbers up meaningful for our business? And is it meaningful for our stakeholders, and for the well-being we have? Because any company can get to 90, 80, 90% participation if you have a global day of service, which a lot of companies have. And I don't want to suggest the companies shouldn't do that. It's fine, it's great. But at the same time, it's an easy way to get the participation numbers up. And it doesn't necessarily mean as much or impress to your key stakeholders that you're trying to impress with it, as much as you think. It may not impress your employees all that much. They may be happy for the day. So now we have to start thinking, what actually is a meaningful way of expressing a target? Is it just the numbers participating, or do we want to start looking at the kind of results that we want? And is it enough to say that we want to make a difference? How do we measure that? And so this is a real opportunity for us to start to dive in and have conversations with our employees, have conversations with our consumers and customers, and with our communities, and say, help us come up with meaningful targets that would show that we're making a difference and that we're also helping our business at the same time. And so that can then start to become much more specific. In the case of the example I was giving earlier with the professional services firm, their targets are much more that we want to make sure that we are actually tangibly improving the capabilities of our nonprofit partners. That's the metric that we want. We want to have that the majority of them, that over 50% are saying that our work helped them become better at using digital technology and AI. We want to know that over 50% said that they were able to increase the number of people that they served. We want to know that over 50% said that their service quality improved. So we can start to set targets that are much more specific, and much more meaningful, that both relate to community well-being as well as business well-being. And on the ESG side, I'll just say this 30 seconds or less. I
Yeah,
could hours on the ESG side.
I'm
We
with
want
you.
to do this. We want to do the same thing on the ESG side. So we want to start saying, a lot of companies have done a race to net zero, and for most industries, that's a good thing. I don't want to discourage it, but we also want to say, if one of the interesting things, if you're a bank, for example, net zero is not as important for your operations. It's much more important that you start de-risking your financial portfolio from carbon and from fossil fuels. So it would be much more meaningful to set a target related to that, than it is to just say, me too, I set a net zero target too. There's some interesting research that says that on the ESG side, Wall Street actually punishes companies when they overcommit to targets, when it's clear that they're just jumping on the bandwagon and doing everything else. You
It's
need to be
fascinating.
strategic and meaningful on the ESG side as well.
Yeah. I in a former life, I'd gone from accounting into marketing. And one of the things that made me successful at early marketing is I had a it was like early into digital, to SEO, to paid ads, right, where we could actually measure the ROI of things. And sometimes I think our volunteering programs are like, if you draw the parallel with marketing, right? If you had a marketing program that said like, we're going to get 300 million people in the US to like see our ad or our billboard, right? That doesn't mean anything, right? Instead, the metrics that you really looked at is like, what's the cost of customer acquisition, right? So like, what is the ROI target that we're going for? What's the, I think are interesting and would be a change for this space. But that's a whole conversation for another time. And I know that we're at time. I know we also have some questions that we didn't fully get to. So for everybody that had submitted a question, Chehun, I see you. It's so awesome seeing your name. We'll try and follow up here in the post session content. Um, Steve, I really want to say here in our final minute, I want to say thank you. This was so interesting. Very generous of you to share the slides. We'll get that all in a recap to everybody, along with the recording and our own summary of it. And to everybody that's still here in chat, there's links to Steve's research at impactroiglobal.com, as well as a link to Steve's LinkedIn profile. And I highly recommend following him there. So I think when we close this meeting, y'all will see a survey. If you're able to drop us any feedback as to what would make this better, that helps MovingWorlds improve the content we share to this incredible community. And if you also have a little react button in your Zoom. And if you want to give Steve a thumbs up, a clap, I've already seen a few of those drip across here. Steve, just really, really want to say thank you. So with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Steve, thank you again so much for the time, and definitely looking forward to continuing this conversation in a number of different forums.
Really appreciate it. Happy to follow up.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.